Welcome to the Equity Institute's podcast on the purpose of public education with me, Vincent Perez, your host. Today, I'm delighted to share a conversation with Manuel Cadenas. Manuel is a first-generation educator, multilingual educator, and community-based partner. He has years of experience in math, IB as a world language educator, and also basketball coach. He's been in both elementary and secondary in the K-12 system, and certainly a delight to know Manuel, to serve alongside him, and grow this partnership in serving not only students, but also our adults in the system who need care as well. Please welcome Manuel Cadenas. Well, thank you so much for being here, Manuel. For our audience, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what is your connection to public education?
Thank you for having me, Vincent. First of all, peace be upon you. Happy to be a participant in your podcast. Connection to public education. Well, I'll give you a little bit about the scholar side and a little bit about the educator side. I'm a first generation immigrant. When I arrived to the States, there wasn't ELL, there was ESL. So that was my introduction to public education. Was an ESL student for about a year. Within that year, because back in Venezuela, I had the privilege of going to private schools. I had background in English. So within a year, they offered a graduation from ESL, so to speak. And that graduation was into special ed. They had me visit the special ed room. And at least my mother and I had a say, although my mom was very obedient to the system, she would always tell me, this is their system. Let's follow it. We had to say that, hey, maybe this isn't the way for you to go, special ed. And oddly enough, there were lots of friends of mine, melanated friends of mine, Black friends, athletes were in those special ed classes. And it was also an introduction to public schools. We tried to mainstream it, but I ended up repeating what would have been my senior year of high school. So if you were to look at, and I don't know if we can name names of the institutions and whatnot, or if you prefer not to, but if we would have looked at the yearbooks of the institution that I went, I was a senior 2 years in a row. They held me back because, they couldn't believe that I had physics, biology, all these sciences from a third world country. And those were the words that they used,
So at what age or grade did you enter?
I got here, this was 95. I should have been class of 95. I was class of 96. And at the time, I arrived here as a 14-year-old. I turned 15 within 20 days of arriving in the U.S. And, I come from a family of, my mom was the 11th out of 12 siblings at one point. So imagine, having this community behind me and having to now adapt to this new way of life. So yeah, it was sad times now that I think of it, but got through it all. I was able to finish in 96 with the help of some very instrumental folks. I was able to enter or be admitted into Washington State University. My mom, that's where my mom was going to school. That's the reason why we came to the U.S. She had a scholarship from the institution that she used to work at in Venezuela. But it was short-lived, she was here, finished her postgraduate or her, I don't remember at the time, it may have been a PhD. And then she went back. So I was left here to finish. I was also paying out of state tuition. So I remember at the time I had to, there was a, what was it called? Out of state tuition waiver. I was able to work for the university a minimum of 20 hours and be full time. Those were the conditions. And, I was able to pay in-state tuition. But, coming from Venezuela, obviously I didn't have the funds. So I had some help from my dad initially, but I worked through college. I had hoop dreams at the time. I've been a basketball player forever. And I would play with the basketball team. I knew I had what it took, but I just didn't have the time, so that was short-lived, the hoop dreams, although I still hoop to this day. But anyhow, man, I know that could go on forever, Got tired of the cold weather, so I finished my degree at Texas A&M. I went down to Texas A&M, and that was also short-lived. As soon as I got my degree, I said, let me at least go back to Washington, So I had met my wife at Washington State, got to live together for about 4 years while we were down in Texas, tied the knot, and we both came back up. So I've been educating here in Seattle, the greater Seattle area, since 2003 to 2004. Initially, because I had a Texas State certificate, I began in private schools. I was with Catholic schools, but as soon as I could, I got an endorsement in foreign languages, took the TOEFLs, took, the West Bs and all that, and taught in high school the majority of the time. Majority of the time at Rainier Beach High School in South Seattle, and then at Kent Meridian High School. So we're talking now at 18 years in the classroom. That was also, an experience. I got to apply a lot of what I learned as a scholar, being multilingual. I was part of a lot of IEP meetings when the translator wouldn't show up. I was also put in a position where I could see where my mom was back when I was a scholar. So I advocated for families, and families could tell that I was legitimately translating in a way that who they were used to translating for them wasn't doing. So they would handpick me and they would say, no, I want him rather than that other guy. So, it was full circle, I guess, in a way. My advocacy for majority Black, majority non-English speakers was something that became just a passion. And I think I already had it from the experience that I had, so I became also a union rep in the building. So I got to know another side of the game, and all that complemented my role in the classroom. I joined PBIS, positive behavior intervention systems or supports. I'm sorry. And through that, I got introduced to restorative practices. At the time, I had already been a teacher or an educator for, I think, 11 years. But I wish I would have known that out of college. It transformed my practice. It allowed me to know, and I'm not going to say it, the experience of providing a voice to my scholars allowed me to know that although I come from a marginalized background, I still had a lot of privilege to me. And it also allowed me to know that I could serve them, try to liberate them and learn about liberation altogether. Yeah, that's when my real advocacy began. I became emboldened by the input that my scholars were giving me. I made the first couple of, they weren't even trainings at the time. There were a couple of just orientation talks about restorative practices. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was on a Thursday. On Friday, there were no desks in my room. We were seated in a circle. We were having conversations. And of course, our systems are obsessed with data, and the data started building up. The attendance for my classes started being noticeably they were being noticed by admin. Although the quality of the homework wasn't what I wanted it to be, more homework started being turned in, and with the use of that data and what I thought was the prioritization of testimony, we were able to apply for grants, and we were able to institute restorative practices as an institution. This is back at Rainier Beach. I do have to not be meek, I have to pound my chest and say, hey, we did that, what we tried to do became a pilot or a blueprint for what some of the work that Seattle Public Schools is doing currently. We tried to get, if not part of the staff trained, we try to get a few of the staff, and then we get a restorative coordinator that teaches the staff about the practices, but obviously, this is, we're talking now 8 years. This is work that is overdue. Our students are hurting. They know that they're in a system that does not, I don't think, and this is my personal opinion, it's not about self-sufficiency. It's about dependency. I've been butting heads with the system for the last 10 years, the greater part of those 10 years. So, get to the pandemic. All these inequities were just exacerbated. I said, I have to do more. We were teaching online at the time, and, not having a quality Wi-Fi became another barrier for those students that I had been advocating for. So I said, you know what, I'm going to start an agency, an LLC. I'm going to tutor and offer help for these. So many of the students were failing, and I felt like the system and the majority of teachers were just proud to poke them in the eye and say, it's what you're not doing. And I'm like, we're in the middle of the pandemic. So I began, I'm 13 days shy of my third anniversary as a entity of my own, as a Solutions by Cadenas is my agency. But as soon as schools reopened, of course, the families that I wanted to serve, they just didn't have the the push, the finances to say, yeah, I can send them to school and keep them with you. So I had to pivot. And that's when I, knocked on the door of some of the folks with WEA that I knew. I started teaching implicit bias courses, microaggressions, what else? White supremacy. And once they saw that I had a forte on restorative practices, then I began to build curriculum for them. And there was a huge following. We literally had folks that would check to see, hey, when is so-and-so teaching, and whatever course, whatever module we were teaching, they would request us, right? And we're talking, pandemic, the murder of George Floyd. We had a huge DEI push or prioritization. Unfortunately, at this point, that's at its lowest, I would say. With the dwindling of ESSER funds and emergency funds, equity is not a priority. And I'm being very vocal about that. And obviously, when you advocate for those that don't have a voice, you're always going to be isolated in some way. But I'm proudly isolated at this point. I'm very much a disruptor. I'm proud to be that. That's what led us to meet, through my work with the Root of Us. We are partners in the way of trying to change Seattle public schools. That's how Fernell Miller and I met. And that's how you and I got introduced. So wanting to do education in a different way. That's what I'm striving for.
Wanting and needing, right? And not only for practitioners, but obviously for the young people. I was really struck that you said you were emboldened by student voice, right? That's what I heard, is like your career makes a shift. And even for a man of color to be in the educational system, the public system, right? You already are connecting to and being looked up to and reaching students who otherwise sometimes fall through the cracks without that representation, without that human connection. Part of my philosophy and approach, really, when I think about harness the heart, engage the body, and then activate the mind. Right? So even when you say that your attendance increased, right? That's heart, right? You're engaging people's spirit, right? Students and their scholars, right? We'll get to the mind. You said, well, homework gets to, but that comes after their bodies engaged. They're in circle. They're with their somatic experience. They're feeling safe. They're in community, and then this kind of active scholarship, I think, can occur. So with that in mind, with your whole experience as an immigrant to a new educational system, and then your focus now on restorative practice, and you see really advocating for families and inviting student voice in, and especially this experience of special education, both in your own experience as well as serving students and families who are navigating that part of the schooling system. The big question I'm asking here is what is the purpose of public education?
The point or the intent of public education to me is to liberate these students, to meet them where they're at, because what we think is success for them, success is not prescribed. What is success for me may not mean what is success for you. I can very much think of specific students that the college spiel wasn't appealing to them, and we had advisory classes that also were very well attended, and they were asking me, well, what are you doing? I'm having circle with them, and I'm asking them, how can I best serve you? And that was something that I got reprimanded for, because I wasn't adhering to the and I'm telling my age here, but the cassette, right, of this is what we need to talk about in advisory, and it's college. A lot of these youngins, they're already entrepreneurs. They just don't have the knowledge of what to file for and all that. They're helping their families survive in a different way that is the traditional way. So I had a lot of Spanish speaking or heritage speakers that wanted to organize the way that their parents were earning a living, So this was also my last year, after having the knowledge of how to begin an LLC, I started talking about, hey, let's see if we can get you to file an LLC, because it is my firm belief that students should leave high school with a small business. And I would tell them it's okay if it doesn't go the right way. It's okay for us to fail and learn, and that's not fail. It's a learning experience. And once you know how to do it the first time, you'll know how to do it a second time, right? So that's what I think it's our job as educators, is to whatever it is that they want to do. Some of them don't want anything to do with the LLC, but they want to go straight into a job. So what am I here to do for you? Hey, I can be a reference for you. I can give you recommendation letters. There are students to this day, although I'm 3 years removed from the traditional classroom, they still hit me up. Hey, Cadenas, you think you can give me a recommendation letter? And then, of course, I went to college, so I could tell them a thing or two about if that was the route that they wanted to do. But it's about meeting them where they're at. That to me should be the point of public education, is not a conveyor belt. And I know that it was designed to be a conveyor belt. I know now that it was designed to make workers out of these young minds and dismiss their creativity. So back to what you were saying earlier about me being a male of color. Now I'm not only a male of color. Now I know what you want to do with your life, and I'm willing to, go through walls for you to get to where you want to be. So that obviously, that got me into trouble, because I was doing too much. I was also partnering with security staff that were also doing too much. We were doing men's circles within public schools, and they found ways to give us, letters of direction, which are, reprimanding letters for the smallest things. And I just felt like as long as I stayed in public schools, and I know that not a lot of my colleagues share that view with me, but I had to do it in a different way. I have to support these families in another way. So that's why the majority of the work that I do now is I'm trying to change the minds of those people that are entrusted 130 plus students a year, because that was my workload. I had 140 kids per year. So I'm training teachers. I'm trying to change the way that they think their job is about. I'm trying to hopefully get into those minds prior to getting their first year education. That's my goal, I guess, is not to do it once they've been tainted by the system, is to get them prior to it. So that's what I wish I could do. That's what I wish the system was about. But I have my doubts, I have to say, Vincent. There are times that I feel like doing our own thing, establishing our own schools, and I'm talking about the global majority melanated folks. I'm conflicted. I'm a contradiction. I'm a living contradiction. Because there are times that I feel we are given, and I know this is a quote from Malcolm X. We're given small victories, but the transformations are not really happening. And I hear speeches from the 50s and 60s about public education that are super relevant today. So I wonder, how long have we been idling? How long have we been appeased and given the carrot just for us to hush and stop our rhetoric? But, every day is different for me. Every day I go through a range of conviction, I guess. But at least my role now as an entrepreneur allows me to see that, hey, I can go hard every day, and my return will be mirroring that effort, and not so much like in public schools, whether, if you were really, really, really about students, and I see it a lot from my colleagues, they can be disillusioned by the system and they continue to collect the same amount of money, So for me, it's about, hey, let's go hard and be rewarded, hopefully the same way in return. So long answer for you.
Oh, it's a big question, and even how people interpret it. But you're first out of the chutes, it's liberation. And that always gets me cool. Liberation from what? I've really been wondering, like, so if you went to a school that really taught you everything you needed to know to live a meaningful, successful, happy life, and that's all going to be different per person, right? Like, what would you learn? How would you learn it? Part of what you're offering, right, is to be in circle and be in community. That's certainly the how. Mm-hmm. And, you've worked with around, all of our answers. It's this ancestral gift and circle. Like we already know this. It's not, it's ancient, right? It's very human. Mm-hmm. So the idea that you're being penalized for holding men's circle is part of the status quo. And I have my serious critiques about education, right? And I think must never be abandoned. I cannot do it, right? For me, and thinking about what does K-12 public ed really offer, in theory, right? It can be this great equalizer. And there's a lot of fixes we need around funding, around property connected to it, and who gets to go to what kinds of schools and what kinds of facilities they have access to in terms of just labs and all the rest. So you've been doing things that have been working, and essentially what I'm hearing is you're kind of pushed out, right? Just and you made some choices about where you want to put your time, but also like, do you want to be spending your time in kind of a combative experience in advocacy in that kind of role, or do you really just want to be holding the people that you're serving without some of that bureaucratic kind of static, or something about, so I'm curious if I'm hearing that right, but my next question really leads to like, what's really working? What in your experience has really empowered students, created meaning? And you're talking about pathways to entrepreneurship and, I think if I was like a 19, 20, 21 year old and I just wish somebody would sat me down and said, dream really big. Deal with your pain, especially as men. And there's a whole another conversation, a whole other podcast probably around what that means. And then thirdly, start a business, and like you're saying, right, get that experience, understand, because the beauty of America is that anybody can start a business, documented, undocumented, it doesn't matter. Anybody can start a business. And that, to me, there is something in that. There's a whole capitalist system to critique, but there's something about like, I have my own agency and I can make some things happen in my life and for my family. So what kinds of things did you see really working? And even that now in educating educators, like what's really working for you? What have you seen really kind of harness that heart and bring people alive and this experience of liberation?
I think what's working is that education, like us folks, us people, is not a monolith. Education should be different for each person, and should be customizing it and tailoring a lot of what we do. Because I would say it's the same thing for my life as an educator now for adults. Once you show them that there's a different way, it's almost like there's a breath of fresh air when they finally get it, but I think what all young and not so young are striving is a sense of community, when they know that they're backed up or supported by people that get their essence and take the time to hear what it is that they've gone through, because a lot of times, and this is a byproduct of me becoming a restorative educator, a lot of times it's just listening, not even giving a response. It taught me that I don't have to say anything in return. And it taught me to even ask the question, do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to give my takes on it? And that to me is in complete contrast with what our society is. We live in a society that, I know I've said it in other circles, and other youngins have told me, man, that's really powerful. Predatory listening. Like, we're listening, but we're listening and we're already stopping our listening to frame an answer that matches the score of what you may be saying. So I think as a society, we need to hear. We need to hear and listen to what each has to say, what our stories are. I happened to facilitate a circle with Fernell on Thursday for a coalition of people that have been fighting for restorative practices. I've been with these folks for going on a year, countless meetings, but the person that's the lead didn't want to surrender his agenda, right? But we got to facilitate it in circle format. And for so many of those folks, we had close to 30 people in the audience. It was their first time, so a lot of people, and you and I know this, restorative practices has become buzzwords. They speak on it, they say they're supportive, but they haven't experienced it. And that's the one thing that I always say, as a participant, all you got to do is go through it. When somebody that knows the process can show you that it's done well with efficacy, and you may be convinced of that first time, But then for adults, it's also teaching them, and this is another thing that's societal, that you can learn through doing it wrong. There's no other way but to go through those pitfalls so that you can finesse the art form, because teaching in and of itself, to me, is an art form. But I gotta criticize, our teacher programs. We want a cookie cutter lesson plan. We want teacher additions. This is the way that it should be. And if it doesn't go that way, the lesson didn't go right, So this is not a fail safe, or it should be, but it's not taught as a fail safe profession. I know that we're entrusted the lives of others, the futures of others, but I think that if we share with those young folks that, hey, things can go wrong and that's okay, we would be so less stressed. So much, our guards would be lowered when we humanize ourselves by saying, perfection is it's an easy way into depression, so all of this and what we're really talking about is white supremacy and how these systems are just permeated by white supremacy, and we don't acknowledge that, and we ruffle the feathers of those that more often than not have the say or the decision making to say, yeah, let's change it. So obviously I get frustrated by that, as you mentioned. Yeah, I do feel in a way I was forced out of the profession, but I did make some decisions of my own, do I miss it? Absolutely. But knowing this way of earning a living, I don't think that I could go back. You mentioned, yes, every kid should start a business, but why didn't I learn about that until 42 years old? So I think that's also something that empowered my students. That, wow, you've been in the classroom, you have clout, you have, whatever degrees or certifications, and wow, you're now realizing that you could do it any other way, and you're doing it. I think it was empowering for them. And to this day, a lot of the youngins that I work with, we're still communicating. We're still in contact. Some of them have kids of their own I run into at their jobs. There's love there. And that's another thing that I don't think people bring up enough, is when everything you do or when you teach through love, and the possibilities are endless, but we're all scared to embody what love really is, and I think embodying love got me in trouble at times. And as one of my scholars once told me, he said, yeah, but you still get paid. So he was spot on with that, this is one youngin that I'm still in contact with, and this was through the pandemic. He was like, Cadenas, you're empowering us. Yes, you're telling us to advocate for ourselves, but you're still part of the system. So I think that was one of the things that pushed me to say, you know what? Yes, let's try it a different way. And who knows? Never say never. I might come back at some point to the classroom, although right now I don't see it. But I miss it. I mean, I miss the constant interaction, because yes, I interact with them, and they're now young adults. But I would be a fool to say that I don't miss it.
You mentioned something about teacher programs and to deliver or get through content, but never like an adaptive kind of, oh, this isn't working, and just, and what I call being married to a lesson plan, right? I don't want to be like, oh, this is what I wrote, this is the plan, push through, even though
how boring.
Anybody in the space, like, we got to adapt to the actual learners. So what I hear you saying is really not this kind of plan and deliver, but really creating the environment. So even if you're not saying, right, even if you're not delivering the knowledge or whatever it is we're examining, that you're helping because of your authority, because of an adult and bunch of, a lot of young people and they're minors. They don't have a lot of legal rights. There's a whole asymmetrical power dynamic being experienced. So if you take that power and invest it in creating the environment, is what I hear you saying, right? It's not about what I have to offer and I'm going to, wake up these minds of liberty. It's really about creating the learning environment that we can all swim in, right? And thinking about engaging questions and finding answers and all the rest, right? So that you're not the guru or the sage on the stage, all those kinds of concepts, right? That you have all the answers to offer. No, really, I'm going to leverage my power and make an environment where we can share in our learning and really experience this liberation. So that's kind of what I'm taking away from this. I'm curious if you have, like, part of my next question is really about the challenges that you see to implementing some of this stuff that really works. Mm-hmm. And any calls to action to respond to those challenges.
The population that needs it the most, how can I frame it? Those parents are working 2-3 jobs. I think it's a 3-pronged approach. I think that already we have the teacher voice or the teacher advocacy for restorative practices. The student is off the chain. That to me, it baffles me how many students have gone to school board meetings and there's recorded testimony of their support for restorative practices, but yet it hasn't transformed into action. So I feel that the prong that we're missing is the parents. And I feel that the parents that are most convinced by it, because I taught a couple of heritage speaker classes, and those families were so involved with the school because I was their liaison, because I was speaking Spanish to them. If the testimony from those parents from the marginalized community were to flood school board meetings, I think those school board directors would be scared not to do this. But what I continue to see is that a lot of them finagle, or they give us that carrot that we talked about a couple of minutes ago. Here's this, whatever, a BLM support statement. But what has that really translated into? What work has trickled down to student desks as a byproduct of this word of support? And I'm speaking about some of the local districts that I've worked in. I'm also part of the Kent Educators of Color, and I said the district name, but that's also been a chosen family that I've sided with, and we've done a lot of work for the last 3 years, and we've strong-armed the district into doing some things, but ultimately I keep on seeing that those are just symbolic victories. They're not actual swinging of the pendulum the other way, So I think I would like to have more parents go to school board meetings and more, and I know that there's language barriers, but I think that's where the most disservice is done, is these parents that they know cannot voice all that they need. Therefore, and going back to my experience, there were a lot of times I would go to school just to eat. So I think that some parents are also just content that their students are taken care of for whatever, 6 hours, 7 hours, and they get a meal that the pandemic also showed me. They were stuck at home and they weren't eating at home, so there's a lot of basic needs, and that's a gift and a curse also about American public education, is that they're taking care of some basic needs, but then we neglect the humanity of these kids, and we just want to force feed them content, and content is not what they need. So who better than a parent than to speak of those things? There's just barriers when it comes to working parents. How do you get them to school board meetings? That's been something that's bounced the walls of my skull for the last 5 years, is how, because I get them one-on-one and I can see the passion, especially special ed, special 504 Spanish speaking parents. They know that they're not getting the services they were promised for them to sign those documents. How do we go to bat for them, or how can they go to bat for their own? Maybe they feel that it's only for a short period of time, their sons and daughters' educational experience. So they kind of just give up in a way. So how do I embolden them enough to rattle the cage? I just feel that, these everybody is operating under fear. What I mean by that is that, teachers are scared of what their administrators are going to say. Administrators are scared of what their whatever strand directors are going to say, and those strand directors are scared about what the school board directors are going to say, and they're scared about what the voters are going to say. But the ones that are emboldened, the ones that have no fear, are the young folks. So I just wish I could provide a sense of hope for whether it's the young folks or their families to become activists in a way. But yeah, it's all theory. I wish I had practice. I wish I had a blueprint, and maybe that's what I'm trying to do. There's a lot of things that I'm trying to take the anecdotal or the testimony of young folks and put them out there unfiltered. But obviously, I'm also aware of, if I want transformation, I have to portray it in a way that it doesn't come across as what it really is, and that's criticism. But me personally, I want to be told what I'm not doing right. I feel that a lot of love comes in the form of correction, so I don't think that a lot of adults share that view. So when they're corrected, when they're being told, then we want to talk about the positives, and and we can go off about even teacher evaluations, right? What do our administrators do? They start with positives, and I'm all about PBIS, right? But I feel that because we're so agenda based and our time is so short, I want to get to the meat of it. Like, tell me what I need to do better. That's just me, tell me what I need to do better to better serve these students. Yeah, I just feel that, I don't know if it's an American thing. We don't have the callus for that type of criticism, or that type of constructive criticism, if we want to call it that.
I think feedback in general has to be taught, right? Both to give and receive. But this is still part of the bigger question about learning organizations for me. why are schools not learning organizations, right? The question is kind of like, there's something in the irony of it, yeah, that these schoolhouses, these houses of learning are not learning systems. And so I think to give and receive, this is all across the board. I mean, I think in marriages and all the way down from like student to teachers, teacher to student, but also, this teacher evaluation component. Feedback is a whole area to explore, period, in being human, right? and accountability. And I think there is liberation in accountability, right? There is something about correcting and especially if one is doing harm, right? And then you're freed from doing that harm and you find different pathways to do your job essentially in a good way. Right. So, you really have me sitting. I'm going to leave here really thinking about parents and really the educator experience. You're right. There's just so much there. I think educators are overburdened,
No doubt.
There's so many things that they're doing. That's why, to me, to build comprehensive mental health infrastructure, right? So you're not also the social worker and, but there's referral systems within the building and we're really addressing the whole experience, right? The well-being of our young people and ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right, as practitioners and humans. But I've been closing this out. You opened up a little bit in the front end about your immigrant experience coming from a private system in Venezuela. So going to a public system in America, what was school's impact on you? Like, what was your K-12 experience and what is that lasting impact?
Wow, you're making me reminisce just by asking me the question. I think something that varies when you go and look at the educational system of a lot of non-US systems is that the public system isn't optimal from the get-go, or at least when I go back to my experience in elementary, like I would always see my older cousins and where they would go to school, and even not well-off families, they do what they can to provide a better education. So I mentioned earlier, my mom having so many siblings, we weren't well off, but anybody busted their backs to pay for education, so I would say private education is more popular where I grew up than public, right? So I guess there was, I don't know, maybe there was a rigidity about that education that people strived for. I think of the school administrators of these institutions, and some of them were Spaniards. Some of them, I went to one Catholic school back there, only one year, and it was super, super rigid. And when I think of it, it's the complete contrast of what I'm trying to teach as a new education, right? But I think it instilled me with a lot of conservative values. I think that you kind of hit on it just now. We're on a slippery slope today. I think that we don't know how to balance grace and accountability. I think that in a lot of our systems today, because with equity as an excuse, we don't want to promote accountability. And I think that ends up exacerbating racism because we tend to think that only a certain population needs accountability. Right. So not having any expectations, it's a form of racism. So going back to my practice now, not me as a scholar, but I would tell my students, hey, I see where you're at, and what I'm demanding of you is not something that's not within reach. What do you think? Because I feel that if we stay in a comfort zone, we don't grow. So yes, I can give you grace. But grace, I believe that healthy grace is also limited, right? Like I have to have a hard line and say, you can do it. I'm here to help you. Tell me how to help you. But let's go beyond where you've been, So that being said, I'm unafraid of criticism, me personally, I feel that we need that accountability for all of us to go beyond where we're at. And if we're on a standstill, we're not growing. You're either getting worse or you're getting better. If you're at a standstill, we're not doing our jobs as educators. So I think to me, that's what my background gave me, you may come from a not well off family, but in this system, we believe you can do better. And I know that that's unusual. And I have conversations with young folks about that all the time. Like I tell them, if I love you, I will correct you. Because if I don't correct you, I don't love you. Like to me, correction is love. To me, feedback And I try to my best as an adult to embody that. I try not to take it personal. I try to say, give me your undivided, your 100. Give me your 100. Well, your 100. That's what I want to hear. And then it's up to me what I do with it. Even when we go on the other side of not constructive, but what am I thinking? If you're nitpicking, or I guess it's up to me what I do with it. And I think that's part of the education that we need to give our young folks, is that it's all about you. It's all about what you do with it. And I don't think that's a U.S. school thing. I think that's something from my formation, that, yes, there's going to be people that are not as well-intentioned that tell you things, but can you grab something out of what they're telling you to tweak something in your life that's going to make you a better person? And to me, it's never been about grades. That's something we haven't talked about. I know we're wrapping it up. We are definitely going to bat for standardized testing, but why can't we, in a way to also alleviate the load of teachers, the workload of teachers, why can't we collectively heal? Can teachers have the space to have these conversations in circle and recognize that, there's a lot of unlearning that I had to do, and there's a lot of relearning that I have to do. In the presence of these young folks, that by the time that they got to me as ninth graders, they were already, shaped in one particular way. So yeah, I don't know how many educators I know that are comfortable with that type of feedback. I think it's very much based on even the way that we're evaluated as teachers, is that everything is good. No, I want to know what I'm doing wrong. I want to know what I'm doing wrong. Tell me, because I want to fix it. And that's the beauty also about working with young folks. They have no filter. They'll tell you how it is, as long as you've shown what's in your heart. I think that's also something. Vulnerability is not easy for teachers. I think they're great actors, but once we show our essence as people, young folks, just like I said earlier, if I, as an educator, I go to bat for them, they're going to go to bat for me. And that's why we have the relationships that we have up until this point.
I'm wondering about, like, the pedagogy of love is a baseline, right? All this other, this feedback and corrections and guidance, right, is received in a good way, right? There are pathways and practices in that. But you said something about, healing. And I think schools can be, at their best, they are. And classrooms have this. Some classrooms, some teachers, this is their whole career. And it creates healing communities. Mm-hmm. I remember doing some work for a school, and everybody kept talking about this band teacher, and like, oh, you got a band. And, like, what's really happening there? What's really happening when kids go to this space, right? They're seen, they're heard, they're valued, and they're empowered, and they're excited, and they love to be there. And I hear this, it was a different grades. It was like, I did these focus groups, 6, 7, and 8. And I just kept hearing, I'm like, well, what's going on over there, right? Because it does mean, and because the question was about mental health as well. I mean, the whole focus group was about that. And they're saying, this is a healing space for me. And so I think about, how do we scale that, right? How do we really harness that and make it a system-wide practice and priority? And then other students say, what do you mean healing space? The school is what's doing harm to me. Right. So there's all across the board.
I don't think that there are many restorative practitioners. For now is one of them, that, hey, I'm doing this and I've been in the classroom, and I can tell you that it is possible that you, through restorative practices, can emphasize academics, but let's take care of these relationships first. Because as I said earlier, if they know that I'm showing you my heart and I'm seeing yours, and I'm going to fight for you, they will reciprocate. But you have to be unafraid to show who you really are. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to teach teachers how to authentically be themselves and recognize their shortcomings too, because we're humans. But kids will be the most forgiving of those, deficiencies or shortcomings, if we want to call them that. When you're right alongside of them, you're not necessarily on a hierarchical position, or I'm above here and you're down there, and I speak and you listen. No, I'm here to listen to you. I think students have given me a complimentary education, perhaps more impactful than my formal education in college and whatnot. So I owe them my practice. I really do.
Well, that's a powerful, beautiful note to close on. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vincent, and keep doing the good work. Appreciate you, man.